Hey everybody, welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games. I am Harry, and before we go any further, please make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe to our channel if you're interested in some more board game related content. But today, it's the final countdown. The final countdown. My top 5 games of all time. I've already been doing a series of videos, my top 50 games of all time. I've been working my way all the way down from number 50 to number 6, and I'm finally here. The 5 best games in the history of gaming, according to me. Do take that with a grain of salt. It's my personal opinion in gaming, and it might not reflect your personal taste. But if you're curious as to know what my 5 favorite games of all time have been so far in my gaming experience, these are it. And without no further ado, we will be proceeding to my number 5 game of all time. And it is this heavy box, Seven Wonders. Seven Wonders is a civilization-themed game with a card drafting mechanism. It's the pick and pass card drafting style where you have a hand of cards, you choose one, you set it aside, it belongs to you, and then you pass the rest of the hand to the player to your left and clockwise, and every player does the same. This game here, however, incorporates a very intricate system of needing certain cards that represent resources to help you build other cards. It also has chain building, where certain buildings in your civilization that you have built already can allow you to build a future building for free in a subsequent round. This is played through the course of 3 rounds, representing 3 different ages. And from age to age, the buildings progress in their technology, in what they're able to do for you, in their cost value, and they also they progress in their complexity, right? From round to round, the decisions you'll be making are going to be a little bit harder. In round 1, it's pretty basic. You're getting a feel for what direction you're going to be going in the game. And then in rounds 2 and 3, you're going to be building upon the foundation that you laid in round 1. I really enjoy this game. I've had wonderful experiences. This box here, it contains 3 expansions. It contains the cities expansions. Well, actually 4. The cities expansions, the leaders expansions, the Wonder Pack, and the Babel expansion are all contained in this game. And I like to play with it all. It's a blast. The base game is perfectly fine in and of itself. It's a great game. It's almost gateway-ish. I think aside from the fact that the symbols are a little bit complicated, well, not complicated, but will take some time to get familiar with, and maybe for people who are not used to the idea of simultaneous play, because that's the case here. There are no turn orders. Everybody's doing their turn at the same time. Aside from those factors, I feel like the pick and pass, card drafting mechanism is pretty simple to pick up upon. It's something that people can learn and get with pretty quickly. And again, once they just play a few times and learn the symbols, it becomes a little bit easier. But for me, the meat of this game is when you add these expansions, when you add the cities, that adds an 8th card to your hand, when you add the leaders, that add some pre-game strategy to the game, right? So it's a draft before the first round even begins to draft certain historical leaders, which again adds a little bit of the historical thematic flavor to this game. But it also points you in a direction. You have to make some tough decisions in that first draft as to what direction you want to go into the game going forward. And sometimes the best laid plans work out, and sometimes they don't. And also the Babel expansion, which adds a couple other external features to the game. This all adds to the length of the game, but it's still, I feel like I can knock a game of Seven Wonders out in about 40 minutes. And that is awesome. I feel like I get this really, meaty, crunchy experience. It feels very satisfying, very satiating for me. And at the same time, it's not such a time investment. It's not something that I have to invest over an hour or 2 hours into to get that same very rewarding, fulfilling experience. And also, this is a family favorite for my nephews and I. My nephews and my niece and I, we really enjoy playing this game. We play this game quite often. I would say we play this game at least once a month, which for us is very often. And again, we always get a satisfying experience. Now, my record in this game is not very good. This game I always use as the proof that winning and how high a game ranks for me has little to no correlation, because this is one of my least successful games. I mean, I think I get second and third place quite often, but first place in this game, hardly ever, and yet it's still my number 5 favorite game of all time, Seven Wonders. And now we move on to my number 4 game of all time, and it is Le Havre, designed by Uwe Rosenberg and published by Lookout Games. By the way, I don't think I mentioned the designers. So for Seven Wonders, this is designed by Antoine Bauza and published by Repos Productions. So back to my number 4, Le Havre by Uwe Rosenberg and published by Lookout Games. This is one of Uwe Rosenberg's big box worker placement Euro style games. This game, basically you're running a harbor and you are acquiring all these different types of goods and commodities that you want to trade back for coin value, that you want to ship for money, that you exchange or upgrade, you know, your clay upgrades to brick, and your, you know, grain upgrades to bread, and your cattle can be turned to meat, and so on and so forth. And you got all of these different cards that represent different buildings that you and your opponents are trying to acquire to add to your portion of the city. And then you've got the generic cards that are already part of the city that are neutral, player neutral cards. And on your turn, you can go to any building, whether it's your buildings, your opponent's buildings, or the city's buildings. You could place your worker, you have one worker, on any of those buildings. If it is one of your opponent's buildings or a neutral building, there is a fee or a price you might have to pay, while your buildings will always be free, and you will collect money when people use your buildings. And it's all about trying to find the right time and the right building to capitalize and optimize your turn on that turn. Now, what's interesting about this, it has a very interesting resource conversion aspect to it, because you're dealing with all these kind of resources and you're trying to figure out a way to convert one resource. Ultimately, you want to convert everything into money, right? Because your money is not only a very powerful tool throughout the game, but at the end of the game, your money is your end game score. It's your final score. It's your victory points, if you will. But you sometimes intermittently, with the ultimate goal of trying to get that money, you're exchanging some goods for other goods that in the moment are more optimal and can help you towards your long-term goal of getting more money, right? So that's basically what all these buildings do. They help, you know, turn some of your resources either into upgraded versions of themselves or into something totally different that might be more helpful depending on which direction your game plan is working towards. It's a really, really cool game. I like worker placement. I like resource management. I like, you know, the economic feel to this game. Another very interesting mechanism is that each round consists of 7 turns amongst all the players. So that means that collectively, and this game plays from 1 through 5, it does have a solo version. Collectively, the players will have 7 turns in each round. So if you're playing, for example, with 3 people, the first player is going to get 3 turns on the round, and each of the other 2 players are only going to get 2 turns that round. And then in subsequent rounds, you change who's the first player, obviously, and then again, someone gets 3 turns and the other 2 players get 2 turns. So not everybody's going to have the same amount of rounds, the same amount of turns in each round, but at the end of each round, each player has the same expectation of feeding their people, which is a very, you know, reoccurring thing in lots of Uwe Rosenberg's games, where at the end of certain rounds, you have to feed your people a certain quantity of food. You still have the same pressure as your opponents to feed your people, but you might have 1 less turn in that round to accomplish the same goal. So this game is really, really neat. I appreciate the quality of the game. I appreciate the variety of the cards. I appreciate the brilliance of design. I appreciate just the fun challenge of trying to, you know, be as efficient, as productive, and as prosperous as possible in this game. This is also one of my wife's favorite games. I'm not gonna say exactly where it ranks in her top rankings, because we do plan on possibly starting next week recording her top games of all time, so no spoilers there. But she does love this game, and I love this game too, and it's my number 4 game of all time, Le Havre. And now we move on to my number 3 game of all time. Very similar to Agricola, we have, oh, I spoiled it. Very similar to Le Havre, we have Agricola, designed by Uwe Rosenberg again, and published, this edition at least, by Mayfair Games. I believe the new editions, the upgraded editions, are by Lookout Games as well. I might be mistaken. But this edition that I have here is by Mayfair Games. Again, Uwe Rosenberg shows up on my list. I enjoy his approach to worker placement. Agricola is a little bit different than Le Havre. In many senses, first of all, it's a farming theme as opposed to a harbor theme. But also, it is different in the sense that Le Havre is a much more generous game, a much more prosperous game. No matter who wins, your end game result looks pretty good. You look rich, you look prosperous, you look successful. Just that one player, outdid you and is more successful than you. In Agricola, the scores can get pretty meager, and even the winner can look bad, and it's very possible for the losers to look bad. But I like this game. I probably appreciate that more, actually, the fact that it's less generous, the fact that it's more tense, the fact that the decisions are more crucial, because you can easily win, you easily lose the game just based off a couple of bad decisions or neglecting some things. One of the things that people have criticized about this game is that this game tries to make you be a little good at almost every aspect of the game, so people feel like they're pigeonholed into a certain strategy, but that's not the case. At the end of the day, no matter how hard you try, you are going to have to neglect some things. I've had a few games where I've successfully been able to do okay at every aspect of the game, but that's very rare, because how often are your opponents going to allow you to do that? But let me explain a little bit more. So in this game, you are a farmer with your family, and you're trying to grow your family. That's one of the things you're doing. And you're trying to do some animal husbandry with different animals, different herds of animals. You're trying to do some gardening, planting different crops and growing them and reaping them. And you're acquiring different upgrades to help you optimally, turn your animals into food and turn your crops into food, so you could feed your people again. Because at the end of certain rounds, the harvest rounds in this game, you need to feed your people equal to a food supply equal to the amount of players that or members that your family consists of. So for each family member, you have to provide 2 food, right? So the bigger your family is, and your family could grow up to 5, then the more food you have to supply. But in this game, it's a worker placement game. So each round consists of picking from several options of what you could do on your own personal player board by placing your workers on these spots on the main board. And when you occupy that spot, nobody else can occupy that spot. So sometimes you end up blocking your opponents from something that they would have wanted to go to. And sometimes you end up racing for a spot that you both might be desperately craving for. And the turn order might determine who gets there first. The bigger your family is, the more workers you have, right? Because your family are your workers. So if you have a family of 2, you only have two actions you're going to be able to do in a round, while as opposed to your opponent who might have a family of 4, they might get 4 actions in that round. So even if you go first and might get the best action on every given round, if that opponent ends up, having 4 actions to every 2 of yours, in the long run, that opponent might be catching up. Also, one thing that I very much appreciate about this game is the cards that you're handed at the beginning of the game. And when my wife and I play this game, we always do a card draft where we're dealt 10 cards apiece. You have 2 sets of cards. You have your minor improvements, which represent different, technological upgrades that enhance, your ability to maximize your options on the board and the actions that you take. And you also have your occupations, your occupation cards. And your occupation cards consist of different people that are loosely or sometimes intricately related to the farming theme that represent another additional action that you can capitalize on in different turns when you use different aspects of the game board or when you accomplish certain tasks. That's what those two cards do. So we hand each other a hand of 10 cards respectively for those two sets of cards, and we choose 7 to go to take into the game with us. Now, realistically, you're not going to build more than 3 to 5. Okay, maybe more than that. Maybe 3 to like 7. 3 to 7 out of those 14 cards you just selected. But as the game goes on, you might not know which out of those 14 cards you drafted you're going to want to play, right? Because you got to tactically react to, the circumstances in front of you and the direction that the game takes. But to some extent, you map out the direction you want your game to go towards before the game even begins. Very similar to what I mentioned earlier with Seven Wonders and the Leaders expansion, which for me is big. So I like that idea of not only having the tactical response to your opponents and the decisions they make, but also that strategic, long-term, best laid plans, planning ahead of time aspect to the game I really, really appreciate. Also the tactile experience of building your farm with the fences and the meeples, right? Meeples, little wooden meeples that are shaped in the shape of animals, little veggie meeples that are shaped in the shape of the particular crops that you're trying to grow and reap. Really, really cool production-wise, tactile experience. The farming theme is not something that I mind, while I myself don't want to be a farmer in real life. The curiosity of role-playing that farming, that farming occupation has been enjoyable for me. And this game has produced lots of good memories, lots of fun. If you like worker placement, if you like a little bit of card drafting and hand management, this is a good game to try. My number 3 game of all time, Agricola. Whew, that was a mouthful. And now we move on to my number 2 game of all time. And this game is probably the game that is responsible for me taking the next step into the gaming hobby, right? Everybody has their gateway game, and I'm not going to say this is my gateway game. I have played a few designer games before this game, but this was definitely the game that kind of got me over the hump as far as, let me peruse, let me investigate, let me research what else is out there. My number 2 game of all time, and probably one of my most played games of all time, Marvel Legendary. Marvel Legendary is designed by Devin Lowe and published by Upper Deck, which Upper Deck doesn't really do many games, but they've been doing this legendary deck building system. So Marvel Legendary is a deck building game with a Marvel superheroes theme on it. This game has brought lots of fun memories to me. I once ran a league for 3 years. 3 years I ran a league on this game with a lot of different players, a very intricate schedule system, a playoff tournament at the end of each season. Anyways, this game is a Marvel-themed deck builder, but what makes this different than other deck builders is that it feels like it's story-driven, because not only do you have a group of superheroes for each game that you're going to play, you have a group of villains that you're going to fight, a group of henchmen, and so on and so forth. But you also have this evil mastermind, and you shuffle through different options and choose one mastermind. There's a ton of variety in this game. They have dozens of expansions for this game, and I don't see any sign of them running out. And again, the Marvel universe is so expansive that there's so many characters and so many storylines that they can tap into to create further and further content. So you have all these masterminds, and the masterminds each have a different, special master strike that they can use throughout the game to hurt the heroes. And more particularly, you have these schemes, and these schemes are storylines almost. They're plots that change the elements from game to game. So every game is going to be different based on the scheme, because the scheme is going to give you, first of all, a losing condition, because you can lose this game not just to your opponents if you play competitively, because you could either choose to play competitively or cooperatively. This is kind of like a semi-cooperative game, as many people refer to it. But not only can you lose to your opponents, but you can lose to the game itself. Evil can win, as the game refers to it, because each of these schemes has a losing condition that is triggered based on certain things happening in the game board. And each of these schemes is titled after like a very popular Marvel superhero comic storyline. So, and they try to, you know, make the conditions and the different things that change the setup of that scheme, how it affects the game. They try to tie it in thematically with whatever comic book storyline it's coming from. And again, it could feel a little bit abstracted because it's just a card game, a deck building game. But I appreciate the creativity. I appreciate the fact that the game is going to be set up differently. I appreciate the fact that, you know, different aspects of the board, different aspects of the game are going to be highlighted and treated in a different way from game to game. I appreciate the fact that the way to stop evil is not always going to be the same, but there's going to be something new and creative. And every time I open up a new expansion, the thing I'm most excited to look into are the new schemes and how they change the game. Again, tons of variety, tons of you know, different combinations that you can experiment with, tons of characters from all corners of the Marvel Universe. I was a big Marvel fan growing up, which is another reason why I can appreciate this. It speaks to the inner geek in me. It speaks to the inner child in me. And at the same time, I love the deck building mechanism. As I've mentioned in previous videos, deck builders are something that, you know, if you looked at my top 100, you would see a good amount of deck builders. I think there's been, you know, maybe 3 in my top 50, but Marvel Legendary is just an amazing experience for me. I like playing this game solo. I like playing this game with 2 or 3 people, even 4 people. I've never really played it with 5. Not sure if I would want to play it with 5. It would be too long in between my turn. But definitely a fun experience every time I take it to the table. I don't think I've ever had a bad play of my number 2 game of all time, Marvel Legendary. And that's it. It's time for my number 1. Number 1. My greatest game of all time. And it might be a little bit of a disappointment to some people. It might be a little bit of a shock to some people. It might be a little bit of an outlier to some people because it doesn't necessarily resemble some of the other games that have been in my top 10, 15, 20 games, or even maybe my top 50 games. But at the same time, this game is kind of unique. And I like the way it does it. That's it. Let me not belabor it anymore. My number 1 game of all time is Cosmic Encounter. And this is designed by a trio of designers from the 1970s, Bill Eberly and Jack Kittredge and Peter Olaka. And this new edition by Fantasy Flight Games includes Bill Norton. This game, Cosmic Encounter, again, as I mentioned, the original edition is from the 1970s, before I ever even thought of being born. This game was already out there. And there's been many iterations, many editions that have come out through a plethora of different publishers. None have really sustained the test of time, but this latest edition from Cosmic Encounter has been around since 2008. We're talking about 12 years, which in the board gaming industry is an eternity. And it's still around. It's still in print. I think they have a new, nice, revised edition with translucent spaceships. But let me get to this game. So Cosmic Encounter is a science fiction themed game where each player is trying to, they own their colony, they own their own colony of planets with 5 planets, right? They own their own system of planets, 5 planets. And their ships on their planets represent their own colonies. But they're trying to establish colonies on other players' system of planets to the point where they establish 5 colonies. And you do this through either straight up conflict and combat or through the art of negotiation and diplomacy, right? Those are the 2 ways of doing this. So throughout the game, players are taking turns, first of all, trying to, recruit alliances. That's another thing. Alliances are a big part of this game, which I always appreciate that idea of like an alliance. So you have this alliances. You're asking people to join your side, and then each turn by turn or in player order, each player decides which side they're going to take. Are they going to take the side of the offensive player? Are they going to take the side of the defensive player? Or are they just going to sit out, and play it neutral? And then you experience your encounter. And in your encounter, you can decide to negotiate with your opponent. And you have this planning phase right before the actual revealing or resolution phase of what happened in your encounter or your interaction with this opponent. And you can say, hey, I'm going to negotiate. But then you play a card because the combat is determined by a card system, right? You have a hand of cards and you're playing these cards, and these cards have numbers on them. And whoever plays the higher number, combined with the total ships that they have, either from their own ships that they launched into this battle, as well as the combination of all the ships of their allies, is summed up together with the number value in the card you play. And the same thing happens with the defender. And whoever has the higher number, the higher total, wins. And if it's a tie, the defender wins. But however, if players want to play peacefully, they can say, let's negotiate. They play down their cards, they reveal them, you see 2 negotiate cards, and then they engage in some type of negotiation. Maybe they could exchange a few cards, or maybe they could decide to exchange a colony apiece. I'll give you a colony, you give me a colony. But more importantly, what's interesting about this game is that you can betray your partner or the person you're having an encounter with, because when you reveal the card, you can reveal an attack card, and that attack card automatically beats a negotiate card. And all of a sudden, the person's angry, they're offended, they're betrayed, they never want to trust you again, they become your enemy for the rest of this game. I've been on the other end of betraying. I still have not betrayed. In 3 years of playing Cosmic Encounter, I still have not betrayed anybody in Cosmic Encounter. I'm saving it for a really good moment. Really good moment. When it really matters. But I've been on the other end of that betrayal, and it hurts, it stings, and it's hard to get over. But at the same time, it's fun. And it's definitely fun for the person doing the betraying. Now, what makes this game really neat, or 2 things that I think that make this game really neat, are, first of all, the variable player powers. Every player gets a different alien race. And that race grants you a special ability that nobody else on the table has. It grants you a way to tweak the rules, to bend the rules, to do something regarding the rules that is to your favor, that is to your advantage, that nobody else can do. It grants you a power that makes everybody stop and think twice before they want to mess with you. Like, do I really? Well, this guy is, he's the loser. Okay, he's hate. Oh, he's the chosen one. I got to think about whether or not I want to have this encounter with him or her. I got to think about how I want to, approach that encounter because of the benefits he or she might get based on their special alien power. And again, it just makes you feel cool. It makes you feel individual, like an individual. It doesn't make you feel like someone just blending in with the crowd, because you are special. You are someone, and what you bring to the table is totally different than what everybody else brings to the table. The base game alone comes with 50 different alien races. And then there's 6 expansions that add dozens upon dozens of other races. So you cannot get bored with the content in this game. It has lots of variety, which again, as I spoke in Marvel Legendary, is something that I really, really appreciate in a game, knowing that each game is going to feel different. You can't even try to replicate the same game, even if you wanted to. This game automatically lends itself to different experiences from game to game. And another thing that I like about this game is that the end game condition is to get to 5 foreign colonies, to establish 5 colonies outside of your own system of planets. But the cool thing is that more than one person can get to that end goal at the same time due to the very mechanisms of this game. The fact that this is a negotiating game, the fact that this is an alliance-driven game. So when you go to try to take over your 5th colony, you can recruit allies who are also on the cusp of winning the game, who also have 4 colonies and just need 1 more to be pushed over the top and win the game. So realistically, there only has to be 1 loser. It's possible for everybody but 1 player to win. I still haven't seen that happen, but quite often what you do see is you see 2 or 3 people winning the game together. That is really, really cool. you know, and there's always the idea that one player was really the main player who led it all, but it's still cool to ride someone else's coattails into glory and to experience that victory, you know, and also increase your chances of knowing you got a pretty good chance of winning Cosmic Encounter if you just join up with the right people, if you make the right alliances, if you just walk that fine line of diplomacy just right. You got a good chance of winning this game. It's a fun game. It's different than any other game that I really play. And again, it's created lots of great memories. Very few people that I can think of that I've introduced this game that did not like it. The only person I could think of off the top of my head is my good friend Wayne. He did not like this game, but that's another point that I'll talk about some other time. But the point is, this is a great game. Family favorite. My cousins, my niece, my wife, we have a blast playing this game. And it always creates for great stories. When you play a game of Cosmic Encounter, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to remember details, particular details about that game, especially the final moments of that game. There's a good chance that you'll be remembering and telling these stories for years to come. And that's what makes this game so special. Lots of games, you know, the mechanics or the mechanisms and the gameplay kind of just blur away, and you just remember that you played said game, but you don't necessarily remember, you know, what happened in this game. That is not the case at all with Cosmic Encounter. This will always give you a memorable experience, and that is why it's my #1 game of all time, Cosmic Encounter. And that's it. That's my top 50 games of all time. For all those who've been following from the first video, I just want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for giving up your time, investing your time. You know, life is real. You know, adulthood is real. And there's always things that we have to do. And for you to take out the time just to see what my favorite games of all time are, I truly, truly appreciate it. Again, remember, hopefully next week, my wife Lily will be recording her top 25 games of all time. Until then, stay tuned to When Harry Met Board Games. I'm Harry, signing off. Have a good one. Bye-bye.